Hello everyone, this is Periodic Insanity coming to you for the Deepcool Tesseract build. We're going to jump right in here and get to the parts list. Now as you can see on your screen, there are two separate builds going on. Both cases are reviewed in the case off video, and the DIY PC has its own separate build video as well. This video is focused on the Deepcool Tesseract BF build, which will include the actual build, and then we'll get to some benchmarks and talk at the end of the video. Now fade in the parts list. Alright. As you can see, we're going to use all high quality and well reviewed components. So let's start with the case, which is of course the Deepcool Tesseract BF. Inside this case, we're going to fit a EVGA 750B2, which I selected to give whoever ends up with this computer as many upgrade options as possible, as well as almost any choice of graphics card. Next, we've got the motherboard, the Gigabyte H170M-D3H, which is a micro ATX motherboard that's running the Intel H170 chipset. And in that motherboard for our processor, we're going to put a i5-6400 and two 4GB sticks of Avexir budget RAM running at 2133. And then we'll slap on a Cooler Master Hyper 212 Evo to cool the processor. And finally, for the boot drive, we'll use a very good budget SSD in the PNY 1311 240GB version. I didn't really think it was necessary to include a larger mechanical hard drive, as most people either have their own hard drives from old machines or they can find them online pretty cheap. For more details on the components, you can check the links in the description. Alright, now that's it for the parts list. I hope you enjoy watching it being assembled, and I'll see you on the other side, guys.
Am I spinning it the wrong way?
Alright, so the last part of any build is going to be to run some benchmarks. But first I wanted to show you guys how this case held a long graphics card. But first we have to address an issue I have with the case, which is you have to break out your expansion slots. But that's covered in the case review in the case off video. So moving on, I have some pics of my Gigabyte 7950 being inserted into the case. And as you can see, it fit very well in the case with over an inch of clearance, which is more than enough space than most users will ever need. Now we'll get to the benchmarks. We'll start with some non-graphic card tasks. In Cinebench, you can see that there's a bit of a difference between the DIY PC build's i5-6500 and this build's i5-6400. That said, about the 10% difference is probably the worst you can expect in any real-world situation. Now, with two of the same kind of SSDs, you can see that the SSD in this Deepcool Tesseract performed a bit better than the one in the DIY PC build. But even with that slight difference in mind, you can see that both of them performed very well for budget SSDs. Now moving on to what most people would be using this PC for, the graphical benchmarks. First, in Unigen Heaven, we can see where a slightly higher clock processor will make a difference. The i5-6500 pulls ahead slightly in average and max frame rate, but it's in the minimum frame rate that we can see where the i5-6400 couldn't quite keep up with the graphics. Of course, this was only for a split second, and should be taken with a grain of salt, as we can see in the other benchmarks coming up, such as Metro Last Light Redux, where the average and minimum frame rate are only separated by a couple frames. And then moving on finally to the Tomb Raider 2013 benchmark, we can see that there is zero difference between the i5-6500 and the 6400, which leads me to the conclusion that most users will not notice the difference in most real-world tasks. And the i5-6400 is more than adequate for every game today if paired with a decent graphics card. And finally, we're going to look at some temperature numbers inside the case, and you can see that the Deepcool does very well here, even beating out the DIY PC with its full fan loadout, which I believe we can attribute to the vented side panel on the Deepcool case. And that's it for the video, guys. I hope you enjoyed the Deepcool build. If this computer is still for sale, you can check the link in the description, and I'll see you all next time on my next PC build.